Hi, I'm Francie Cooperman Juro, and I was born June 9th, 1943, here in Omaha at Emmanuel Hospital to Miriam Lieb Cooperman and Harold Cooperman.
Tell me a little bit about your mom and dad.
My mother was an artist and went to Minneapolis Art Institute before she met my dad, and there's a story about how they met that's pretty funny. I guess that they had met, and my dad always told the story, and there was another gentleman that my mother was dating, and who I actually met. He came to visit, and my father always said that he flipped with Abe and lost, and so he got my mother. They were married over 60 years, though, and probably fairly happy.
I bet your mother loved that story.
Yeah, actually, she thought it was funny. But, my dad started in the grocery business before I was born. My mother was his cashier, and it was on, I think, North 30th?
North 16th.
North 16th. And first he'd had a bar, and then he sold that.
No, bar was after the
The
war.
bar was after the war? No, it wasn't.
Yes.
No, wrong. He bought the bar, he had the bar before.
No.
Yeah.
After the war, he decided to try something different, and he did the bar for 3
But
months.
then
and
he went
didn't
to
like
work when I was pretty young, right when my dad came home, he went to work for Sam Steinberg, and we lived in their house over on Hanscom Boulevard. And then after that, he bought the store in Ralston.
Yeah.
We were living on 51st Street then,
Mhm.
307 South 51st. And my mother they tried to have more children, but they couldn't, so they tried to adopt, but she was considered a poor health risk. She lived to be over 80. But, so they had to be happy with me. They did have a child born dead that they named Jimmy, that's at the cemetery. And I grew up the typical spoiled brat of, single child. But I got to do everything with my parents, and I always went with them, which is a good thing. And then my father started to get more into business, and I remember I went to camp and I came home and he had bought another store in East Omaha, but he had one in Ashland. My mother and I used to take the bus from 50th and Dodge, 51st and Dodge, you'd flag down the Greyhound. It would stop in Millard, which was like out in the country, on Millard, what's Millard Avenue now. And then we would go out to Ashland on Saturday and have dinner with my dad and then come home with him when the store closed. So I got to help the store.
Growing up, did you work a little in the grocery store?
Yeah, not till I was a little older, but I used to do things like carry the money. You can imagine this now. I used to take the deposit to the bank on Saturday, and because everybody in the town, it's a little tiny town. It's still only under 2,000 people. And then eventually bought a store up in Creighton and then one in Pickstown, South Dakota, so we used to go up there all the time. And we used to stay in this farmhouse by Creighton where my mother had a friend whose parents lived there, which was quite an experience for a Jewish girl from what was the big city to them. And Pickstown was where the Fort Randall Dam was when they were building the dam, and an Indian reservation. And the water was so bad they had to import it from 6 miles away. And
You might talk about when your dad was growing up, how he worked for Al Woolner.
That's how my dad sort of got into the grocery business. Al Wallner was his uncle, the one who had Wallner's, and it's his grandson now, or is that great-grandson? I think it's his grandson that runs it now. And my dad used to work for him, because then you were relatives, sort of took care of each other. It's different than it is now.
He said he got $10 a week for 72 hours a week.
Yeah. And I used to go visit Uncle Al, and he'd give me a free pack of gum, because we lived pretty close to that.
Hi, my name is Rich Juro. I was born in just east of here in Brooklyn and grew up there. My mother was Ada Kroll Juro. She came here at the age of 3 months from what we now know as Belarus. My dad was born in Brooklyn. Parents had come from Kiev in the Ukraine not long before that. I have an older brother, 4 years older, named Evan. I went to Stuyvesant High School, as did he, in Manhattan, and then we both went to Columbia University in Manhattan, and then I went to Columbia University Law School. after my sophomore year in Columbia, I met Fran, who was going to Hood College in Frederick, Maryland. Got permission from her parents to come to New York for June.
I just turned 18, 3 days before I met him.
And we met at Columbia at Spanish class. As I like to tell, this is a true story. I was wearing a Columbia jacket, and she walked up to me and asked, because there was a sign on the door saying that the Spanish class was transferred from Hamilton Hall to Journalism Hall, and she said, in her very shy way, hey, you go here, where is the journalism building that our classes moved to? And I showed her where it was, and that's the first and only time that she ever asked for and followed my directions. Anyway, then we got to going out. I think the following September, Harold and Miriam flew into
Made me come up from Hood.
appeared in New York to see
With Art and Helen.
who this guy with a red goatee was, who was dating her daughter. Anyway, things progressed. Fran transferred up to NYU for her junior and senior year. In June of 1964, Fran graduated college, got married,
And turned 21.
and turned 21 all within 2 weeks. Then I was going to Columbia Law School. Fran worked as a social worker in New York City in the South Bronx. Now we know it as, was then becoming Fort Apache, the Bronx, and then also in Spanish Harlem, where she used her Spanglish that she learned in Columbia summer school class. And after I finished law school, we did Europe literally on $5 a day, and we've been kind of traveling ever since. That was mostly Fran's idea, but I was happy to follow right behind her. Moved out to Omaha temporarily, and I thought I'd be drafted.
23 and 1A,
Yeah.
and you have till you're 26.
So I thought I'd be drafted, so rather than go to work for a law firm, I went to work with her dad and never got drafted.
And I used to tell him he's going to be fat, 40, and frustrated because he never practiced law. And he told me, well, I'm going to be fat and 40, but I like what I'm doing, and I don't think I would like practicing law.
Anyway,
And
so
so I
I-
never did.
So I was working with her dad in what was then Herald supermarkets. At the time, there were like 7 of them, 7 or 8. And of course, shortly, about a year or so after I joined him, he sold off 4 of them. I don't know if that was a coincidence or because I joined him. But anyway, so we were down to 3, East Omaha, Blair, and Ashland. And then he was successfully operating, these are smaller conventional supermarkets. Then in 1979, we heard about this new concept called a warehouse supermarket. There was 1 or 2 in Kansas City, and went down and looked at them, liked the idea. So in February 1980, we opened the first warehouse supermarket, price impact store in the Omaha Council Bluffs area, and it was on Broadway in Council Bluffs, and it's still operating.
And my mother named him.
Yeah. We were looking for a name, and her mom somehow came up with the
She
name
saw
No Frills.
Beth Meyerson on TV talking about a no frills something, and she thought that would be a good name.
So that's where the name No Frills came from, and we used this price impact image, and then as we opened more stores, we gradually modified it. We added bakeries, delis, pharmacies, and other
Cleaning it.
other aspects of a modern supermarket without raising the prices. We gradually grew it to like nine stores,
Somewhere around.
9 or 10. And then in 6 years ago, 10 years ago,
It was 90.
No, about 2000.
Yeah, I
No,
think
2004, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was saying-
About 2004, about 6 years ago, Albertsons decided to leave the market, and we took over 5 of their stores, and so did Bag and Save. We then did a little horse trading and wound up taking over a couple of Baker stores and giving them a couple of the Albertsons locations, although I think we came out ahead. And anyway, by the time we were done, and 2 years ago, we were operating 16 stores from Denison, which is 75 miles away, through Ashland, but most of them in and around the Omaha, Council Bluffs area. At that time, we sold the stores to our senior management team, and they are still operating and have since opened a couple of more stores, and hopefully they'll be successful because
We had
they're
asked
still
my
our
dad
tenants.
I had about, that we didn't have anybody who wanted, my son's a pediatrician, so he's not interested. And my middle child has 3 children, and she doesn't have the time, and she could, and my other daughter doesn't like to tell people what to do. She actually still works for them.
For No Frills, as office manager of the new store.
I have a question I
yeah,
want to ask
okay.
of both
Sure.
of you, but I want each one to answer individually. That
I
first,
can't answer by myself. She always interrupts.
that first meeting at Columbia University when you first saw Rich,
Yeah.
was it love at first sight?
No, I was 18 years old. I was running all over the place. I had already decided that I was only going to date rich guys, which was not rich. And the first day I didn't know how to go home, really
the
the best
subway.
way on the subway, because I was living on the east side and Columbia's on the west side. And so I was standing there with Northern New Jersey Bell and this guy whose father and grandfather gave
Buildings.
buildings at Columbia, one at Barnard, one at Columbia. And so they really fit the bill, right? I wanted to go to the Latin Quarter and all that. And Rich says to me, why don't you come this way? The 3 of us are on the train. And he says, you know,
Transfer.
Rich is there. And he says, why don't you come over this way with me? It's the best way. And I did. And then when later he said to me, I have $7. What do you want to do?
That was a lot of
But I-
money then.
Yeah, but then I still, dated other people, but he sort of didn't after that.
Then you started seeing one another?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I used to come up on the weekends from Hood, and then eventually I transferred to NYU.
She was a hoodlum.
Yes.
And the reason I dated Fran was I couldn't believe there was a Jewish girl from Nebraska.
His grandmother was sure I wasn't Jewish, that I couldn't possibly be Jewish, and I was gonna get on an airplane and fly away. But the real reason she was worried, when she met my father and he spoke to her in Yiddish, and she was happy, was that she was afraid that her jewel, because she helped raise Rich after his mother died, and I'd get pregnant and he'd have to quit school. And my father said if I got pregnant, he would be thrilled to pay for the rest of the education. And they would passing me after that.
So really then, you finished law school and that was the end of your law profession?
He
Yeah.
was a member of the Nebraska
Yeah,
Bar,
I-
inactive.
I passed the New York bar and I passed the Nebraska bar and was admitted, but I've never practiced really.
When you first came here, did you have aspirations of going into law?
Well, as I said, when I came here, we just thought it was temporary because.
Yeah,
and
there was
that
no
I'd
way
be
I was
going-
living in Omaha.
That,
He loved it.
yeah, and then after we were here for a few months and I got reclassified because it turned out
I was pregnant.
Fran was pregnant with our son Kevin, then Fran said, well, maybe we should move back to New York. I said, no, I like it here.
Well, Kevin was 2 months old and my girlfriend got married, and we went for the wedding. And
In New York.
In New York City, and we're like driving on the thruway, and it's, bumper to bumper, 6 lanes parked, and the air conditioning in the car wasn't working, and there was dust. Both of us looked at each other and said, thank God we don't live here.
Do you go back to visit though?
Yeah,
You
we're
still have
leaving
family?
on Wednesday.
Oh, that's
His
nice.
brother
Well,
and our niece
our-
and 5 nephews are there, all from his brother.
Our son went to Columbia
Columbia also.
also, so we used to go in every,
Our kids
once or
went to
twice.
camp with
Yeah.
his uncle and cousin ran a camp, and they went with their only cousins from New Jersey.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
so they really know each other well.
And it's always a thrill to go back, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's always
As a,
fun.
as a tourist, as
Oh,
a
yeah.
visitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, New
Yeah.
York's a wonderful place to live if you have a lot of money. Otherwise, it's a hassle.
Yeah.
It's tough to raise a family unless you're out in the suburbs, and then you might as well be in Omaha.
That's right. But it's amazing how you came here and this became home.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, and
Yeah.
he's now been here a lot longer
Yeah.
than he
Yeah.
ever lived in New York.
Because I've been here
Since you were 23.
44 years almost.
And you really grew into the grocery business.
Yeah, it worked out
Well,
well.
he and my dad temperamentally were very well suited. Rich is a
Opposite.
detailed person, and my father has all the great ideas, but never wanted, he always had somebody else who did the nuts and bolts of getting it together.
You know, it's interesting, in the last couple weeks, because of this grocery thing, I've talked to two people, Paul Ruback,
Okay.
Jerry Rosinski.
Yeah,
They
they
both
both
work
work
for
for
us.
us.
And
Yeah.
boy, did they just go on and on and on about you and your father-in-law.
Yeah.
They just thought that two of the
Yeah.
greatest people that ever lived. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't believe how emphatic they were about that.
This is obviously not, but how is Paul? Haven't seen him in a few years.
Yeah, he was not,
Yeah.
I ran into.
I know Jerry is,
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Both of them
but
are
I
ailing. Both of them are just super nice people.
Yeah.
they
Oh,
really
yeah, they
are.
were.
Just
Paul
very-
was our store manager in Blair for a
Just
while.
loved it. Said
Yeah.
it was the greatest thing he ever did in his
Yeah.
life. And
Mhm.
just
And I
about,
was friendly with his wife, because when she was sort of agoraphobic, but we didn't really know what it was, but she would go if I would sit next to her.
isn't that something?
We're both named Francis, that gave us a bond.
Well, let's go back and talk about your high school years here, Fran, in Omaha.
Well, I went to Central, and I was a fat, ugly teenager, and, but I always had a boyfriend, so it was okay, and I went to everything. But I had a boyfriend from North Carolina that I met through the Jewish stuff at the Air Force Base, and so I was in a big hurry. My senior year in high school, I went down there to spend Christmas vacation in North Carolina.
You also skipped a year.
Well, yeah, but I was in a big rush to get out because I was going to marry him. And so I graduated high school a year early. My girlfriend Betty Jaffe and I, who I just got in touch with somehow, and she found me on the internet through Central thing. And she and I both decided we had enough of high school. And, we went to summer school and took the required English and math and stuff. And J. Arthur Nelson was the principal then, and he said, my mother said, I don't think it's a good idea, and her mother said the same thing. She said, we'll go talk to, Dr. Nelson. So we go in and we say, that we want to graduate early. He says, well, your parents say. We said, well, they think it's a great idea. He says, well, as long as they're for it, it's a great idea. So we go home now and we tell our parents that we're really going to, that he thinks it's a good idea. Of course, he did warn us that we would both have trouble in college because we were immature, which was true, emotionally. But girls don't have the same problems boys do with that. You can look older and you can do it. And so I didn't like this boy that I was going to marry anymore after I went to visit him, but his sister went to Hood, and that's how I chose Hood. Though by the time I got there, she wasn't there. But
Was it a big school?
No, 700 people.
All girls.
All
And
girls?
very few girls. It was Evangelical Reformed United Church of Christ, that compulsory chapel, which I never attended, except the time I arranged for Rabbi Kleinberg, who was Sylvia Lewis's sister's husband at Walter Reed in the Army, and he came out and talked. That's the only time I ever went. And you're supposed to turn people in. But I sat in the dorm and manned the phone so the maid could go and visit her ailing mother at lunch. So.
Well, it had to be a good experience, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good. I wouldn't, problem was, it was a little politically conservative. It was during Kennedy's election, and Dr. Lewis, our professor of political science, was head of Kennedy's campaign. There were two Democrats. Betsy Speed across the hall from Kentucky, Speed Museum. I don't know what her family did, but I noticed that, and someplace, and I asked her, and she said, yeah, it was her grandfather. And then we went and we worked for his campaign for the state of Maryland. And I got to go to the inaugural ball. By then, now anyone can go, but then you had to have an invitation. And Hood arranged for you to go with people from West Point or Annapolis. And so I went with somebody from West Point. And it was pretty interesting. And he came in, but we had actually met him because he came to Hood to speak.
And how about you growing up, Rich? What were things like?
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn where we didn't play baseball. We played stickball and 3-box baseball and 4-box baseball and stoop ball and things like that. I went to Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan, where I went by subway. Then I went to Columbia, where the first year I went by subway. After that, I lived in various off-campus housing.
Dives.
And after I met Fran, which was the summer of 1961, Then we actually, even back then, it was the beginning of Vietnam, and Columbia was a very liberal campus, and they organized, there was
Well,
a busload of...
I was still at Hood.
I know. There was a busload of people going down to picket the White House against...
For peace in Vietnam.
Against having U.S. troops possibly going to Vietnam. And so I went down, it was a $5 bus ride to join the people. And I think I agreed with it, but the main reason was I go down, Fran came in from Hood, and we went duck pin bowling instead.
Yeah.
And then I came back and took the bus back to New York with
And I went back
everybody
to
else.
Hood. And the school was very unhappy with us going to work. A couple of people went down. They didn't like that at all. And that was a very, small, back now, nobody pays any attention to what you're doing.
Did you graduate from there, Fran?
I graduated from NYU in New
Yeah.
York City.
Oh, you did say
I
that.
transferred after
Yeah.
my sophomore year, after I'd met Rich.
Did you guys get married then during those years you were
No,
in
I
school?
got married, I graduated college in '64, Rich in '63, and he was in law school, and then we got married in '64 when I
Okay.
graduated.
Did you ever dream of this, living in Omaha, Nebraska?
No.
Neither did I.
No, that's right. That's right. So you didn't dream of living here, and
No.
Fran, you didn't dream of living here either.
I mean, you talk about provincial New Yorkers, we were, and I mean.
Yeah,
far
you'd
away-
never been
the
west
far-
of Allentown or something.
There was nothing, as far as I knew, there was nothing between Pittsburgh and Los Angeles but a vast wasteland, and here this Jewish girl appeared from the middle of the heartland, and so anyway.
But you
so I
never
thought-
saw yourself as a grocer either, did you?
Oh, no. I never even, I'm one of the few people, whether they're grocers or not, that never worked in a grocery store growing up. I mean, I had other jobs, but not in a grocery store.
Yeah, you worked for the New York Times in law
Yeah, I
school.
worked at New York Times and post office and various other things.
In the grocery store, you and your father-in-law and your father had to work a lot of hours, didn't you?
Yeah, sure. It was 7 days a week.
Every Sunday.
Yeah, it was 7 days a week, but even back then, we would somehow arrange to travel a little bit, and because Harold could go away because I was there, and I could go away because he was there.
But later,
Although
once we had the
generally-
kids, that we did go together a few times.
Yeah. Although generally, oh God, you interrupted again. I forgot my train of thought. For a change. I know, thought escaped me. But yeah, we always, I was never, I did work a lot of hours, 7 days a week, and did a lot of work at home. And Fran was actually very sick from the time that shortly after Carrie was born in 1971 for about 10 or close to 15 years. She was in the hospital a lot with actually life-threatening diseases. So a lot of times we had a housekeeper or somebody to help with the kids. But so in fact, I was the kindergarten room mother.
Oh, I was
for
the
one
room
of the
mother.
kids.
and he had
Yeah,
to
she
do
went in
it.
the hospital, so I was the kindergarten room mother one year. So that,
Actually, they do have plenty of fathers now, but they
now,
didn't then.
at the time, it was,
They were like, what do you mean your husband's coming?
That had to be a tough time in your lives, wasn't it?
yeah, I mean,
You know,
Yes, it
between the
was.
hours
Yeah.
at the store and
Right,
watching
it
the
was.
You
kids
know,
and worrying
the
about
grocery
Fran.
business, the way, because Rich wasn't actually working in the store.
what?
No, I meant you didn't have a job from 9 to 5 in the store.
Well-
You didn't have hours, like you had to punch a time clock, so it
Yeah.
wasn't as bad that way. You
But
know?
I was there anyway.
Yeah, but you had more flexible time
Oh, sure.
than like managers do.
But you guys, I'm sure that the hours had to be ungodly for all of you, even
Yeah.
as the mother
Well, I
at
grew up
home.
with it, so it didn't seem that different. I used to complain a lot when the kids were little, and everybody on Sunday had their husband home, and half of them on Saturday too, and my husband was never home. But what I would do is go out to visit my dad's stepmother, Fanny Cooperman, at Dr. Share home or wherever she was, and, with the kids, then we'd go to my mother's and have lunch. But that's what I used to complain about. I didn't care about the rest of the week, but Sunday was annoying.
Tell me about your kids.
Well, our first one is Kevin, who's now 43. He went to Columbia University and came back to Nebraska, University of Nebraska Med Center for med school. Then he did his residency in pediatrics at Tulane in New Orleans, fell in love with New Orleans, and has stayed there ever since, although he works as a locum tenens, which is a pediatrician temp, and he's worked all over, every place from Maine, on the seacoast of Maine, to New Zealand, to Hawaii, to an Indian reservation in North Dakota. And he, so far that's worked out, except now, finally, at age 43, he has his first real girlfriend, and
he just
she's
brought her
lovely.
home with her two children.
And so she's lovely, so hopefully something will work out from that. Our second child is Kim, or her full name is Kamara Ann.
She changed it legally to Kamara J. Clark.
Yeah, her. And she grew up, all the kids went to Burke High School and Catlin Elementary School, which is right across the street from us. Then she went to Arizona State University near Phoenix, and then stayed down there for a couple of years. Eventually came back, was working in the Broadway store and as assistant manager, and met her husband-to-be, who was working a summer job while he was in college.
In the deli.
And anyway, they met, and then eventually they got married, and his name is Kevin Clark, so we have two Kevins. And he's terrific. He's just a wonderful husband,
And they have
father,
3 children.
and son-in-law.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have
Yeah,
3 children,
have 3
twin
children.
boys, 10 and a half, Cooper and Jackson. Cooper after my father, even though you're not supposed to really do that. My father was thrilled.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't get to know all 3 of the great-grandchildren.
That's got to
And
be a
then-
real blessing.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom did not.
Yeah.
She
So
had
it's,
just found out she was pregnant. My mother died shortly after that. She hadn't even told her. We didn't know yet.
so we only have the 3
Kennedy
grandchildren,
has
but
just turned 6
yeah,
Wednesday.
but they live right here, and that's that's been a real joy for us. And our third child is Carrie. She also went to Burke and then to Arizona State. She stayed down there, and then she moved to Denver, and she married a young man who she had known from college, and he was in Denver too, or something.
They
Anyway,
moved to Denver together.
Anyway, they moved to Denver, then they moved to Sierra Vista,
And then
Arizona,
she
which
left
is,
and came home.
anyway, and then they
Right
split
when
up.
Kennedy
and-
was born.
Yeah, so she's been back home now, back in Omaha for, over 6 years.
Is she working in the store?
Yeah,
She still
she's-
works for
yeah,
No Frills.
yeah.
She's the office manager of the new store. She opens all the stores for them.
Are you still connected in some way with the stores?
Yeah.
Slightly. Well, first of all, we're the landlords for 12 of them. And I'm also technically still an employee as a consultant. And I do give them some advice, some of which they listen to, most of which they don't. But it's work out, and we need them to do well because sold out to them on a time contract basically, and they're still our tenants. So we certainly hope they do well, both for selfish and for reasons that we just hope they do well. They're an independent grocer who took over our lifelong building of a business.
Well, I had asked my dad, as I said, we don't have anyone that's interested in running the company, and he said, then try to sell out to somebody local, because if you sell to a big chain, then they won't care. And so we sold that. He would have liked the idea of the management team, but it's not really like a family business anymore. It's different. I get that from the employees when I go around to the stores where I know the people for a long time.
Did you work in the stores a little bit, Fran,
Yeah.
growing up?
Yes, and I worked for a long time when we were married. I was a supervisor and I went around and did the things that guys don't look at.
We did a lot of the hiring too.
Yeah, I did for a while. For about 5 years, I did human resources, and then I was totally burned out. So then my daughter did it, and then when she got burned out, she went to do something else.
It's got to be a tough job.
It wasn't so bad before the government got involved, then it became a real pain.
Do you think differently because of your legal background in the things you encounter on a day-to-day?
Not really. I mean, I'm probably a little more aware of some of the things that you should or shouldn't be doing. But that's probably as much business training as it is legal training. But I'm still interested in slightly using my law background. I'm involved in several nonprofits now, and I still take an active interest in what happens in legal matters around the United States, Supreme Court, things like that.
Do you guys find that you're relaxed being away from the day-to-day, although you're involved? Do you feel a
I
little
am feeling
less
different.
pressure?
No, I never felt the pressure he
Yeah,
felt at all.
yeah. There was certainly more pressure on the day-to-day. On the other hand, I was not really a workaholic. I mean, I worked hard and long, but we used to get away on vacations
And
and
once we
stuff, and
hired
we
his
always traveled.
replacement, who bought the store, Fred, then we were able to travel as much as we wanted, because he was running the business anyway.
I mean, but.
You have to be able to give up control.
Absolutely.
And some people can't, and they don't retire then.
But it was your life for so many years.
Yeah.
You grew up, you knew nothing else than being in a grocery store.
No, my mother went back to art when I went away to college, and she actually had a couple shows, two in New York, one in Chicago. And I just found, very short time ago, something from before she was married, and it's signed Mary M. Lieb, and it's like two little 2x3 paintings in a brass frame. And funny thing is, my son wants it. But what I found after she died, never had seen these, and they're older than I am, they're also from before I was born, are the drawings. She worked for Brandeis, and she did their fashion.
She was a commercial artist.
She was a commercial artist, she did the fashion things, and they're fascinating. I framed a bunch of them.
It's amazing.
We should also mention that Harold was in the Navy during World War II.
He left when I was 6 weeks old. My mother followed him around a little, and then he went overseas.
Then he was served in the South Pacific.
You know, I have so much admiration for that generation because they were successful because they worked hard. They
Oh,
worked
yeah.
very, very
And
hard.
long.
And long, and I just can't say
Well, my
enough
dad
nice
came
They
from
don't-
Poland,
Yeah.
and from the time when he was 8, he had a paper route. And he had 2 sisters, and his mother had just died, and his father, he was the only one bringing in any money. And Rich's dad told me a story that he didn't know. When he was young, he used to go light the gas lamps, and then he'd have to go out at 4 or 5 in the morning and put them out. Because,
Amazing.
you did whatever you could to
That's right.
survive. People don't seem to do that anymore in the same way.
What about your side of the family? Your dad, what kind of
Well,
work did he do?
Yeah,
He
that
was,
was-
well,
I mean,
yeah,
after-
that was growing up. Yeah, he ran a medical laboratory. He was not a doctor, but he would do like blood tests, pregnancy tests, urinalysis, things like
But
that.
they used
for
the rats
different,
there. White rats.
for
They had white
different-
rats, I thought that was, I'm not going in there, they're white rats.
He would do them, the tests that doctors would order, and then he would, give them the results.
And he was
And-
grandfathered in because they did pass a law that you had to have a chemistry degree or be an MD, and he wasn't, but because he had been doing it for so long.
He probably was as sharp as someone with a degree in that.
Yeah, I think it was pretty
Yeah,
smart.
when he retired to Miami, I used to always go down and, make sure he was okay and stuff, and he was in the hospital, they did these tests, well, he knows all about that. So it was Humana, remember when they got into all that trouble? Well, he tried to complain to Medicare, he said, they charged me for all these tests, I didn't have them. And basically, they said, go away, and then pretty soon, right after, not that long after that, maybe about 6 months, right after he died, it was a big expose exactly of that. But see, he picked it up right away. He's looking at his bill,
Sure.
and he says, I didn't.
I mean, he didn't have to pay for it, but he
But
knew it was
It's-
wrong.
It's the principle.
Right.
Yeah, and he
Yeah.
didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mother died when I was 12, a few months before my bar mitzvah, which was obviously kind of a pretty
Tough time.
In August,
tough time. July 1st.
July 1st.
Yeah. Right. I was up at camp my cousin's children's camp, and so, anyway, my uncle came up, and we spent a few days basically chopping wood and things like that, and that was...
His grandmother lived in the next apartment, and his aunt, who was married but didn't have children, she was married 15 years before
Yeah,
we were,
right.
at a party after we got
Anyway.
married at camp. For us. And so he had other people there to, you know.
Had to be a tough time in your life, though, very
Sure.
tough.
Yeah, but I mean, you know...
His brother had just started
Yeah.
college, right?
Yeah.
Was he in-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
What kind of
you know,
work does your brother do, or did he do?
He was primarily in advertising and marketing. He was with Gray Advertising and then Citicorp and things like that. And then, about 20 years ago or so, he went out on his own, had his own little advertising marketing company, and he's still doing it because he was married 3 times.
And his third wife.
And the third wife, he had 3 sons with the first wife, and they're the same age as our kids, you know, in their 40s. And then he had 3 children with his third wife, and they're now 16, 18, and 17, 19, and 20, or something like that. And
2 of them.
unfortunately, his third wife died like 2 months
After the little girl was born.
Fun. And so
Luckily,
they,
he found a significant other about 4 years after that, and they're still together, though they never got married, and she really did a good job of
so,
making them almost normal, because that was tough. He moved out of the
Very
city,
tough.
you know, they did, because it's almost impossible. She had a son, same age as the oldest one, and it was tough.
but anyway, so they're still going.
That's good.
In fact, we're gonna see them
Yeah, we're having a
this
party
Sunday.
next Sunday in New York.
Well, that's nice. That's nice. Now, I think the nice part of it is that your health, thank God, is good.
Yeah.
And that you have the
Yeah.
ability and the
Right.
physical strength to travel.
Yeah.
We like
That's
that.
Yeah,
wonderful.
I mean, that's, everybody, I like to say, everybody has their own craziness, whether it's
What they like to
3
do.
houses or gambling or beaches.
Cars.
We just travel to all over the world
I think
as
that's
often as we
phenomenal.
can.
And we're finally, after 16 years, having a family vacation again. The last one was before Kim was married, and we're going to Alaska.
Yeah, with our 3
Yeah.
kids and our 3 grandkids,
Oh, that's very
Yeah.
nice.
so that'll be fun.
So they get to enjoy their parents without you having to run off to the store or do the things that you
Right.
normally would take you
Right.
away. Did you get any free time just regularly when the kids were growing up where you could devote a day to the kids, or?
Yeah.
You did
Yeah.
things like Indian princesses and Indian guides.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's good.
And they probably weren't full days, but they were, you know, half days or evenings or.
And we used to go
something.
visit them at camp when they were at camp, and my
Yeah.
parents would go, after the first year, then my parents would go different times, so then they would have us there, and his brother would go up and so.
But you do feel a little relief without being the guy all the time.
Yeah,
I don't
but,
feel
but
visible relief. I don't
not,
think- I
I
mean,
mean,
it's just-
not as much as you might think, because the last 3-4 years, I had hired my replacement, and he was very competent.
And he used to say to me, "Take him away soon." Now my
And then
daughter
we-
says, "Take him away soon."
And we wound up actually selling out to him and 5
Other
or 6
senior
of the
management.
other top managements.
Are you happy with what they're doing?
Yeah, they're doing, everybody would do things a little different, but on the whole, they're doing very well. They've opened 2 stores, 2 additional stores, and hopefully they'll continue to do well. I mean, and it's a tough economy they say that people have to eat, so grocery business is somewhat resistant to deflation and recession, but it still is difficult.
Because you get a lot more people coming through and just buying your lost leaders.
That's right.
Right. One of the other things that we've always done is collect Shona stone sculpture from Zimbabwe.
For about 25 years.
And we've started many years ago from a dealer in New York, and then we went to Zimbabwe with him and bought a container load of sculptures, and we continue to buy, and now they're not only all over our house, but all over our backyard. And Jocelyn Art Museum just decided a year or 2 ago to have a sculpture garden, and they came
20th
out.
century art.
They came out and looked at our stuff, and there are now 2 of our sculptures in the Jocelyn Museum Sculpture Garden.
One in the Children's Discovery Garden and one right outside the atrium where you eat. You look right out at it, and it's all lit up at night. It really looks nice. Looks better, a lot better there than it did in my yard.
That has to make you feel pretty proud, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And
So-
we've become very involved, especially now that I'm retired pretty much. And we were involved with Jocelyn. I'm involved, I'm on the executive board committee of the Omaha Community Playhouse and also the Anti-Defamation League here. And I'm also active with B'nai B'rith and the ACLU, which Fran doesn't agree with, but that's a whole nother
No,
story.
I told them every time they fight, they'd say something about, do something against illegal immigrant, and, try to give them rights, that I'm gonna donate twice what he donates to them for the defense fund of the other.
Yeah, we've always voted, but we don't really have to because our vote cancels each other
Well,
out.
I used to be just like him, but see, I matured and he didn't. But our
wait.
travels have led to a lot of other things too. We took a trip with American Museum of Natural History to Madagascar, and we did fund one of the exhibits in the new Madagascar exhibit.
Yeah.
From that, we had a professor she's from Columbia and American Museum, and she was phenomenal, and she got us interested in that. And so when the zoo was looking, we decided we wanted to be part of it. And
I think that's fantastic. I'm impressed with that.
When we went to Zimbabwe and Botswana on the camping, before we went to the sculptures, like we were being a tent and the bathroom, so to speak, would be 100 yards down the road. And so Fran would get up to go outside and pee at night, and she'd unzip the tent, and
I never went out again.
There was a pair of green eyes of a hyena looking at her. And then the other time she walked down and she ran running back to the guide and
No,
said,
I never. I went,
said
there was
there's a hippo.
And it turned out he was a rogue hippo.
Yeah.
It was a three-bird, and they actually had to shoot him the next day. And it was interesting because there were a bunch of South Africans camping. They had all their SUVs. They circled them like they used to do the wagons for
Yeah,
safety.
because-
Because a rogue hippo is really dangerous. They kill more people than anybody.
And we've continued, like,
We went
last...
back to Zimbabwe
well, yeah,
because we wanted to go to Great Zimbabwe, which was the ancient capital, and of course they'd have all that trouble there and you couldn't. Because that's where the first Shona artist got their, the first piece we bought, that's where he got his idea for that sculpture.
Last fall, we went back this time to the Central African Republic, where we went hunting with the pygmies, and we also went to see the lowland gorillas in their natural habitat.
Been to Uganda to see the
Mountain gorillas.
Mountain gorillas. That was very
But, I mean, we've been traveling forever. Like in 1966, as I said, we went to Europe on $5 a day. We also went to the Soviet Union, and all we could hear about was Amerikansky, Vietnam, imperialism.
But people came up to us, and when we went back in like '80, the same thing, and they said, it's not, we like Americans, it's our governments. And you find that now in other places where we just went to Iran.
Yeah. And
How are things there? When you
very good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very
we
interesting.
We went to an island called Bandar Abbas, and then we flew up to
No, it's a
Shiraz.
city.
Yeah, it's a city, but it's
No.
at the
Yeah, it's at the Straits of
and
Hormuz.
the people were friendly.
Oh,
Yes.
very, and they did complain about their government, but they said they're not really allowed to because you go to jail and you don't come out.
I think the nice thing about your travels is that you're going to unique places
Yeah.
and not on the bus and driving through major cities all day
Oh,
long.
no. We'll do some of that too, but we like to really get out into the third world and developing
Well,
countries.
especially now because we don't know how
see
much
what's
longer
happening.
we'll be able to do it.
Did this little girl from Nebraska ever dream of doing all these things?
That was her
my
idea.
idea.
Okay, good.
She's the one that got us going.
How about this guy from New York? Did he ever dream of that?
Well, in New York, we used to say, hey, it's a jungle out there, and she took me literally.
Yeah, for our honeymoon, I worked for it. My father offered to send us on a honeymoon. We'd say, you want a honeymoon, you pay for it. So my whole senior year in college, I worked, and we went to Mexico. And went to Acapulco and Tasco.
Tell me about your wedding.
My wedding was my mother's greatest, she had a great, she had the set designers. I mean, they did the windows from Brandeis, and it was at the old Fontanelle.
Well, the wedding was at Bethel.
Yeah.
And it was right before Sherna
Shirna
Traeger's.
Schrager, Jack Schrager's daughter. She her mother called my mother and said, can you move the wedding up a little, because my daughter can only get married then, her husband just finished doing his residency, and that's the only time they have. And so my mother said, well, sure, and so we shared flowers. And I just saw her
And-
8 weeks, right before her brother died, she came to
From,
here.
from our reception, we went.
To their
back- we-
reception.
We went to their reception.
And my father had been to too many weddings, and he said, he's gonna plan the food, because he didn't like white chicken breast that they served all the time, so he said they're gonna have steak, and he got, they couldn't get the baked potatoes he wanted, he brought them from the store, and the cake collapsed.
Oh, really?
Well, our bakery, I said to my mother, how come they're still drinking? Because, that's not a big thing. And she says, well, the cake is having a problem and the baker is out fixing it. They forgot to put the cardboard underneath so it was sagging.
We had, what, 200 people
I
at
have
the
no
wedding?
idea. Rich had six.
And then only 6 of them were from
From your
me.
side.
Yeah, Penny
my-
and Evan.
My
No,
dad, my brother and sister-in-law, and
The cousins that
cousin.
ran the camp,
Yeah,
the son
yeah.
and the daughter, that's it.
Right.
And then your friend Jim Johnson from Columbia.
Was he at the wedding?
Yes, he
Oh,
was.
okay. Yeah, he's
What
still-
year did you get married?
64.
And it's worked out then, hasn't it?
Yeah,
Most of
we-
the
New
time-
Yorker with this
As I-
Omaha
as I-
girl.
As I like to say, we've been married 46 years and almost half have been happy.
Last year on.
Doesn't bother her at all.
I don't pay attention. Yeah, last year, on Father's Day, which was our 45th anniversary, Rich and the kids had a surprise 66th birthday for me, because I threatened them on pain of death if they did 65. So they did 66. It worked out great. All these people came in. I was really surprised. A lot of our family was already here for the College World Series, so it worked out well.
Well, I had done a surprise party for her 40th and a surprise party for her 50th. And those of you that know Fran know she's not easily surprised, but we did it both times. So then she threatened me on the pain of death or worse, not to do a surprise 65th. So I didn't. We did a surprise 66th.
And my youngest daughter did it all. She did like Route 66 with the traveling, and they had all these passports. It was really very cleverly
I'll
done.
bet, I'll bet. So it's been a happy ride, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's been great. And, we obviously had some ups and downs, but on the whole, it's been very much up, and it still is. And, we're still traveling and have the kids and the grandkids,
And we've been taking the grandkids, on a trip every year with my
Yeah.
evil daughter, as we call it, evil mother, won't let us take them by ourselves. But we've taken them to Club Med twice, and now we're going to Alaska.
That's very
So-
nice.
And it's
it's been
fun.
good. And
They make it worthwhile.
the grandkids are really fun and nice kids.
Well, you can
and-
really enjoy them
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
But you're not
Yeah.
tied down quite as much.
Right. Yeah,
He
and we
likes
do-
to go to a lot of the games and things like that.
Yeah, they're so scheduled with sports activities, and it's fun to go
That's
there.
nice.
And then we have lunch or dinner at least once or twice a week when we're here, which isn't that often.
Yeah,
So-
one night had seen the kids like 4 days in a row. Well, we had the kids one night, and then the next night was something, and then Saturday was something, and then Sunday was the holiday. It was the first night of Passover, or whatever night that was. It was like, and so then he says, are you going to one of their friends' house for Passover? I said, no. And he says, well, he says, that's good, because that would have been 5 days, and you would have been tired of us. I said, oh, you mean, Cooper, you're tired of us? Not yet.
Not yet.
Well, Kim, Kevin, and Carrie, and Kevin, and Cooper, Jackson, and Kennedy, this is Grandma, and I just want to tell you that we love you, and we really enjoy being with you.
And I'd like to say the same to all of you. You guys are all great. It's been wonderful raising you and being part of your life, and we hope to do so for many more years, and we love you all very much.